There is deep purpose for each and every one of our reason for being here. And so if it's calling you, it will keep calling. And if there's resistance, just begin to embrace it and be with it and listen to it. Kind of like all of that resistance for those 3 years of like, I couldn't move to Austin because it wasn't time for me, but I kept listening. I kept focusing. I kept embracing. I kept going in. I wasn't discounting, dismaying. I was just kind of being curious, but yet it was clear that there was a thread there. And so instead of it being according to my will and my timing, I kept availing myself to divine will. Just saying, all right, use me as you choose, whatever's in the highest and best for me and whatever's in the highest and best for my journey and those that I am meant to serve ultimately, then I allow myself to go onto that path. I will walk that path. And so what does that look like for you? If you're feeling the call, but there's some resistance and unworthiness, self-doubt, whatever might be coming up, be with that. And know that within those shadow frequencies, which is where the resistance resides, will reveal the gift, will reveal the answers. And by all means, ask for help. And then when help shows up in the form of a resource, a teacher, or a teaching, pay attention and note it, because it just may change your life. Well, hey there, and welcome back to the Fire and Soul podcast, the space to deepen your divine alignment and further activate your inner awakening. And I'm just so grateful that you are here. I'm grateful that I'm here. I'm in Austin. This is my first solo cast from this little bungalow that I'm renting for a few months, that I feel really blessed by, because this allows me to discover where me and my 3 fur babies will root. And I am saying for sure that Austin is the most aligned decision that I have made in a very, very long time. And that has a lot to do with what the topic is today and the callings on our souls and the deep listening and honoring of those divine directives that are essential in these times, and the courage that we must cultivate to be able to honor those calls through that aligned, inspired action. And so there's so much that I want to talk about and share, but for purposes of today, I want to share a little bit about the journey of getting here, what it's like to be here, and a little bit of what's really pulling me forward, and why I have chosen Austin that was beyond even what I thought. This is such a meta experience, and very unlike me, to be honest, to make a move like this. I mean, I basically lived in California most of my life. Born in Washington State, but at about 5 years old, we moved to the central coast of California. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous Shell Beach, Pismo Beach, San Luis Obispo, Arroyo Grande, which is where my sister still resides and where I was raised. And then went down to Los Angeles and lived there for a very long time, decades and decades, aside from the 3 years that I was in Florida working at the Home Shopping Network. And that was basically from 2011, 12, and 13. But I always knew, even when I went there, that it was a 3 to 5 year gig, and it was 3 years. Did I say 3 to 5 years? No, I think I said 2 to 3. It was 2 years and 10 months, and I was back. And I thought it would be like an advanced degree in live television, and it was, and it served my journey well. But being here is like this whole other thing. And I want to share about it because there was something to be said about divine timing, and also really listening deeply and going according to not necessarily my will, but divine will. And that's a big part of what this whole conversation really has at its core essence. So if you will, I'm going to take you back just a little bit, and it's, back in basically the spring of 22. Is that right? No. Spring of 21. Wow. It's just been a blur, hasn't it? Since the lockdowns and all of that. So it was spring of 21. I was in a mastermind with James Wedmore, and that is where it was February of 21, and the red pill rabbit hole door was open for me, or I would say the red pill door was open. I courageously walked through that door and then slid down that red pill rabbit hole. And life was never the same ever since. And that was not an easy time. It was a scary time. So if that's where you are right now, I truly mean it when I say trust, the clarity will come, but keep going, right? There's just so many more resources and people who are speaking so boldly and bravely these days, but it's quite a journey, right? Because first it was becoming aware of some of the agendas and the controllers and all of that. And that was deeply harrowing for me. And I had to go through all of that so that I could then see how that connected to my own internal narratives and fears and worries and concerns and all of that darkness in the shadow within, right? And so once I was able to move through that with devotion and reverence and authenticity, and I'm still on that path very much so, that became really what I have discovered was an authentic spiritual awakening. Now it's going to be different for everyone, but for me, it's this pathway of being able to be with the darker parts of my journey, not only this life, but past lives, and seeing how they all connect and how they're here to serve this particular incarnation. And I have to be honest, if I hadn't found the gene keys earlier this year, in fact, it was February, a rediscovery of the gene keys, because my dear friend and master coach, Gary Ing, he turned me on to the gene keys way back when, like about 3 years ago, when we were having so many of our dialogues on Telegram, because he lives in Australia. And we were just connecting in real time almost daily. He was such a beautiful guide and friend and an ally for me, because he had gone through something very similar a couple of years prior to my experience. And so he could really see me and hold space for me, and then offer me up tools and resources and teachings, and one of which included the gene keys. Well, back then, I didn't have access to that kind of content. It was what I thought was boring. I didn't think it applied. And I basically just poo-pooed it. And I was like, yeah, not for me. I don't really get this stuff. And if I look back now, it's because I didn't have access in my consciousness. I hadn't really turned inward enough and for long enough to get to know myself in terms of frequency, vibration, and energetics. And so I just had no capacity for it whatsoever. But fast forward to doing a lot of deep inner work for about 2.5 years, being on this path with, again, just total devotion in the ways that I know how, and still experience some pretty strong turbulence in some of my sacred relationships, familial relationships, some of my personal relationships. And so I found myself on my knees at my personal sacred altar in my home. And I asked for help. And that's a really big key. Aaron Apke talked about that a couple of weeks ago. It's super essential to ask for help when we need it, and then to recognize the resources, the teachers, and the teachings when they appear on our path. And so here I was on my knees asking for help. And about maybe 10 days later, I don't have the exact timing, I saw a workshop with Aaron Apke, who I had been studying under for maybe, I don't know, a year at that point on YouTube, just kind of lighter at that point. It's been a much, much deeper dive all of this year, as many of you have heard if you tuned into that episode where he was our guest a couple of weeks ago. And that one is called The Pathway to Heart-Based Consciousness. And that's really what it is. It's moving up from the lower three primal energy centers known as our chakras up to the heart, right? So graduating, evolving into our heart space, and residing there in loving relationships through forgiveness and alchemy and open-heartedness. And so of course we all can go there, and we've been there, and we'll go there again, but how often are we residing there, truly residing there? And I don't just mean in our personal relationships, and especially with ourselves, but also everything that we see in the mainstream headlines. And this was a really, really big catalyst for me, because there was some stuff that was up. So anyway, he was offering up this workshop, and it shocked me that I just said yes. It didn't matter that I didn't really work with cannabis on any level, especially ingesting it in a smoke way, which I'm sure there's a lot of different ways that you can ingest it. But he was offering up this workshop called Breathe with Cannabis. And it was with a guy named Ryan. I cannot remember the spelling of his last name. And he teaches conscious cannabis use. And then Christopher August, who's been a guest on this show and who talked about his breathwork app, Beats and Breath, which I cannot recommend enough. It's been life-changing, life-saving for me in so many ways. And then, of course, Aaron Apke taught on healthy relational dynamics, the giving and receiving versus the taking and the keeping, which is what we highlighted here, and amongst many other things, a couple of weeks ago. But anyway, it was in that workshop where Christopher August, leading the breathwork portion, who's become a dear friend of mine, talked about the gene keys. And there was something about the way that he dropped that seed that I was like, oh, okay, so the relational dynamics in this topic was super important. And that's a big part of why I'm here. But there was this underlying activation that was coming through as soon as Christopher August started talking about his devotion to being on the path of studying the gene keys for the past 7 to 8 years. And my whole soul just was like new. It's like, that is another reason why I'm in this workshop. Remember, when we ask for help, our guides, our angels, our master teachers, our highest self, they will deliver the resources, the teachers, the teachings on our path. But it's up for us to pay attention to recognize that it's there, right? Those signs, symbols, and synchronicities. And so I did. And so I was, this is like a 2-for-1. It was really just multidimensional and multifaceted to go into that workshop that was so completely incredible. They offer up one, by the way, every month. It's really affordable, 40 something bucks, I think $44. Follow Aaron Apke, Christopher Argus, and you'll find it. Maybe join us next month. I'm sure I'll be there if I can. But anyway, so that's what led me on the path of going back to the gene keys and becoming really devoted as a student into this journey and understanding the cosmic catalyst that it really is based on the moment and birthplace and time and location of when I emerged on this planet in this lifetime, and the shadows, the gifts, and the city that my soul has to offer. And the shadow is a great master teacher, and within the shadow reveals the gifts that we have to offer the world in service to all. And so that's the path that I've been on. And so circling back to 3 years ago and recognizing that Austin was calling, it was calling big time. Not only were many of the people that I followed and really cared about, really was inspired by their teachings on social media, or friends of mine were leaving the LA or Orange County areas of California and moving here, but also a lot of the podcasts and teachers on YouTube that I was really inspired by lived here. And it's interesting because divine timing is everything, right? And really being able to discern those divine directives and what is our timing. So speaking to that, I started following some communities and thinking, oh yeah, that community, that's definitely for me. But over time, I was able to recognize, not quite like an in-person community that I feel like I would vibe with these days, because the more that I was on the evolution of my own human consciousness, the more that I was able to attune to different frequencies, different vibrations. I know that you feel the same, and I'm so grateful that we are here and walking this path in this way together, because it means that we are in some harmonics as well. So I just kind of paid attention, and I was just like, all right, so it's not quite that community, it's not quite that community. And so I had booked 3 different trips to the Austin area, but canceled each one of them. And looking back, it's because it wasn't timing. But meanwhile, ego was having a bit of a fit, because it was like, well, where are you going to move and where are you going to land? And you know that you need to leave California eventually. And all of that was an initiation, right? Because I didn't want to leave running from anything, being scared, or being upset at what's happening in California, a state that I loved and still love with my whole heart. And on many levels, wish it could have felt more aligned and resonant to stay there forever, but it wasn't. And it was super clear that it wasn't, with so many reasons, for so many reasons why. But that said, I was on this big journey. Anyone who knows me, including you, if you've been following the pod for a while, knows that that kept calling Austin. And so what happened is I moved into the journey space, into a lot of soft, gentle, heart-opening plant medicine experiences through some phenomenal teachers that like to remain private, that are based out of the Austin area, but left the LA area, Beverly Hills in specifically, in fact, and had moved here, but they do journeys in the LA area a few times a year. And so that's where I met them. And the timing was so good because when I journeyed with them for the first time in November, I was still riddled with a lot of fear. In fact, words that were coming out of my mouth were something to the effect of, I feel like I'm living in the midst of Hunger Games and I feel like I'm being hunted. Now, I can't relate to that today, but back then, just 8 months ago, 9 months ago, that was very relative. That was very much my field. And I was trying really hard to move past that and on that path, but it was very real, it was very deep, and it was ingrained, right? And so in that journey space, I wanted freedom from that. And so that particular first time I was a little nervous. I didn't know their medicine. I wanted to go in gently and lightly. And so I basically said to them, you know what, all I'm here for today or tonight is just to plug back into my heart. I literally said in my intention in the opening circle, I want to walk with Jesus. And I'm not talking about the religious figure or any dogma on that. For me, Jesus has become a phenomenal master teacher for me in this life. And I said, I want to walk with Jesus into the field of divine mother's love. That was my intention, and that is what I got. And I'm so grateful and so grateful for that. I know I just said that twice, but that's how grateful I am. And so I sat in front of a roaring wood burning fireplace for the next 6, 7 hours, and I literally just wept with tears. I could still cry. Maybe I've even shared this story, but it was so impactful because that whole night I just felt like I was walking with God. And that's what I got all night. And so for that, I'm deeply, deeply grateful. And then I went back into the journey space in March. And this time I felt ready to ask for guidance on where am I moving? Because at this point I had even booked a trip to Idaho, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, or Sandy Point, and I was going to go stay with someone that I had met and through the Transformation Leadership Council and do a weekend up there because I was like, okay, well maybe it isn't Austin. And because I was scared to go to Texas, to come to Texas, I'm here because I knew that my mother would never move here, or maybe certain family members. And in my mind, I was like, well, what would they eventually do? And it doesn't really matter where I am. At that point, it was like, oh, just as long as I go somewhere, right? But the call for Austin was still really strongly on my soul. But nevertheless, I was kind of looking at other things and so I asked, in the intention part of the opening circle of like, if it's in my highest and best, I would love to have some clarity on, where am I really moving? And so in that journey, it was interesting because the first thing that needed to happen was I was told by the wisdom of the plants, to walk outside, which I typically don't leave the interior space, but I was told to go outside, and the first thing I did, I was barefoot, and my friend Dallas accompanied me, and he's become a very, very close friend in my life. And I just said, would you mind accompanying me outside? And he said, absolutely. And he didn't say a word. We were just in silence together, but I walked out, and it was maybe 3 or 4 feet onto the land. And it was a private residence in the Hollywood Hills. I mean, it was pretty phenomenal, to be honest. And the backyard would have all this gorgeous landscaping, tall trees of all kinds of different types and varieties, and beautiful flowers and plants and grass. And it was just a beautiful space, and the energy in the air in spring, in March in Los Angeles is really gorgeous, really clear and fresh. And it was a beautiful evening, and maybe, I don't know, at this point, it was like midnight, or I don't know. You lose track of time in the journey space. But the first thing that needed to happen in order for me to really clear my energetic was 2 palm trees. I had to face some fears, some deep fears that I didn't even know had some deep threads that were the teeniest tucks that I wasn't even aware were running me. And so these 2 magnificent palm trees in the backyard, they transformed into what I would call like the evil controllers that I was so afraid of, and still referencing, as the Hunger Games, evildoers. And so these really tall palm trees, I was just kind of looking at them. They were like really scary. And they were like morphing into different types of monsters, like your worst projections, right? Whatever we've seen in movies or we've dreamt about or whatever. And they were kind of lunging toward me. And I remember I was just kind of looking at them and I wasn't giving it any meaning. I was just looking at it. And it was really neutral. But they kept trying so hard to like get at me and lunge at me and just try to scare me so badly. And they were really tall. So I was just kind of looking at them and not giving it any attention or any power, which is our attention, but yet just kind of gazing, just kind of looking at it. And before I knew it, they bowed their head and I felt returned to the light. See, I believe that everything and everyone is seeking resolution with the divine in the deepest levels, but that was the whole point of that particular part of that journey, is that I had to experience that and recognize once and for all that if I give that stuff my attention, that it will destroy me, it will eat me up, it will scare me, it will do its job, right? But if I don't, I can just move on my merry little way. And so in that moment, which my friend to my left, Dallas, was just standing there this whole time. I don't know if that was 10 minutes or if it was an hour. I have no idea the timing on this. But I looked at him and he was just kind of taking in the scene, not speaking, just there holding space next to me. And next thing I know, the entire backyard, the plants, the trees, the flowers, they gave me like a celebratory processional parade, like, yeah, girl, that's the way you do it. And they were really letting me know, like, we're your allies. You can count on us. Like, if you ever need to be reminded of truth, right, then just tune into Mother Nature, just tune into us. And we're going to let you know that you're not alone. You're completely supported at every turn. And it was just so beautiful to feel so rooted, so planted as my bare feet were on the earth. And I never said anything to my friend Dallas. And I just said, okay. And he looked at me and he's like, okay. He said, would you like to see the rest of the backyard? Because I had asked him if he would join me on a journey into the backyard. And so I have this whole other, looks like detour happening. He didn't ask, he didn't, inquire. He knows the journey space really well. And he was just allowing me to do whatever I was going through or had been guided through. And it was just so beautiful. So then we move into the backyard and I'm asking even permission to step on certain grass or to hug a tree. And it was so beautiful to be in such deep communion with all of life, including my fears and the evil controllers. Yeah. Mm. So once I cleared through some of that shadow frequency, then I could get into harmony with all of the mysticism and magic of life, right? And so it was a little bit later, I don't know, maybe 2, 3 hours later, because we journeyed until maybe 4 o'clock in the morning. So maybe an hour, 2 hours, I have no idea. Again, timing becomes irrelevant in these spaces. And I was just kind of sitting there, just taking in the room. There were maybe 14, 15 of us in the space, and I had absolutely fallen in love with everybody in that room. The energy was incredible. I felt at the moment that I actually walked through the front door when I arrived at 5 p.m. that evening. So here we are hours later, and the music is going, the fire is roaring because it's the same house in the Hollywood Hills, and the vibe just feels so open and so connected. Just a lot of open hearts and all of a sudden there was this little message that came through my mind and it said, you're not moving to Idaho. You don't even need to go this weekend. So you may as well cancel that trip. And I was like, oh, okay. And it was just a clear knowing. And I've learned to really listen to the wisdom that comes through in these journey spaces because they have served my journeys really well. Like I can look at each one so far, and there have been 4, well, 3 1/4, because when I brought these facilitators to one of my soul essence retreats back in April of this year in Ojai, a phenomenal retreat that completely changed my way of serving and being in the world. Just yeah, altogether. I was on 1/4 of the medicine so that I could be in this space, but still present enough and aware of what was happening. And also the next day, I didn't want to be depleted. I wanted to be really available for anyone who wanted to process. So anyway, so 3 1/4 times, and I have another journey coming up in just a few weeks here in Austin. Anyway, so then the next part of the message that came through was, with respect to where you're going to live, go journey with them, the people that you're journeying with here, the facilitators, right? Because they come to LA a few times a year, but they're based in Austin. It was go journey with them in Austin, listen to the land, and you will know. And so that's what I did. I booked a trip for about maybe, I think it was about 7, 8 weeks later, because they were going to come join me on retreat a couple of weeks later. And then it was going to be time for me to come and journey with them in maybe the first week of May. So we arrive into Austin. Two of my girlfriends, April and Azure, joined me on this journey. Incredibly blessed by that. April drove. She lives in Texas, but it's a big state. It took her about 5 hours to drive and meet me. Azure, a dear friend of mine from my Florida days, in the yoga space and retreats back then, and she's become such a dear friend of mine. She flew in from the Tampa area. And so what we did, that journey, oh my gosh. Getting to Austin, I mean, talk about going through the grieving process that I had to go through. Let me backtrack a little bit, because my body grieved that day before and day of going into the Austin area. But weeks leading up to this trip to Austin, I remember one morning I woke up at like 5 a.m. And remember, the reason why I had booked and canceled 3 different trips to the Austin area is because I was concerned about leaving California. Was I really ready? And also my mother, we're extremely close. We really bonded when I had the opportunity to stay with her for that spiritual rehab back in late 21 and a lot of 22. And it was such an important time in my awakening journey, and to have that safe harbor to live in her house and to be in her arms and to just have someone who was unafraid, and all the stuff that we were learning and discovering. I poured thousands of hours into all of the alternative media's agendas, et cetera, right? And that was a really intense time, but I'm so glad that I did it, because it's made me stronger, but I don't really catch up on any of that stuff anymore. But nevertheless, it was still a big, big thing to consider not living near her. I've lived near her most of my entire life, and I love that. We're friends. We don't spend a ton of time together, but just even like 10 minutes here and there, or popping into her house for this or that, or her coming over. It's just beautiful to have that gift. And so anyway, about 5 o'clock in the morning, several weeks before I was going to go to the Austin area to journey, I was beckoned out of bed and I heard my highest self saying, "You're never going to want to leave California, but you need to." I was like, "Wait, what?" Because I was like, "Wait, did I just hear what I thought I heard?" And my highest self in a female voice said it again. "You're never going to want to leave." Just like last year when you quit smoking, you didn't want to quit smoking, but you had to quit. That's how leaving California is going to feel. You've got to go. And I called my mother. She's up really early. I think I texted her actually, and I texted her right away. And I just said, I was including her, "We're never going to want to leave California, but it is going to be time to go. And I know I'll most likely go before you, but I just want you to know it's never going to be something that we're most likely going to want to feel." And that was a really important part of my journey, because I had to go through this process layer by layer by layer that I was peeling away. And I actually want to say that my angels and my guides and my master teachers were helping me peel away. And so fast forward to then driving to the airport to book or to go onto this flight into the Austin area. I was now grieving, but my body was feeling it. And so I missed my flight. I went through deep stress, deep resistance. So simultaneously, my body had already started to feel this deep resistance for many, many, many weeks. Anytime I was going to go south on the 101 freeway, and anyone who knows the LA area knows that there's basically 3 big freeways, or 5. There's the 101, there's the 405, there's the 5, and there's the 10. There's like the big, big freeways throughout the state of California, in fact. And so the 101 was like about a mile away from my exit back up to my community. And anytime I would go south, like into LA, my whole body would start to get into resistance. I would stress, I would tense up. I might rage, I might react, whatever it was. It was just like, ooh, I did not want to be there, just like total irritation. Meanwhile, if I go north or just over the mountains, so west into Malibu, I was much better. So I was more at ease, but I knew that it wasn't about staying in California and just going north or west. It was because I was only over the mountains by about 10 minutes by car. It was more so just Southern California area and also California in general. So I was paying attention to that. I was paying attention to my body's wisdom. I was paying attention to the rhythms that were revealing themselves. And I was very aware when I was in total flow, right? And so here I was going through simultaneously the resistance to being in the freeways and all of that energy and denseness of just so many people and mismatched vibes, right? The density of big cities and especially bluer cities, I'll just say. And and so I missed the flight and I thought, oh gosh, is that a sign? Maybe I shouldn't go, or this flight, I was scared to fly because of all of that stuff. But I made the commitment. I was like, you know what? I'm going to get the next flight and I'm going to go. My ladies picked me up. I get here pretty late. The next morning, I was like, okay, I'm not going to look at any rentals, but I do want to go down to this place called Barton Springs. I want to put my feet in the bottom of the river and I want to just see what happens. Because remember that journey space. Go journey in Austin, listen to the land, and you will know. So I did. I went to Barton Springs. I was wearing some skinny jeans. I had to roll them up really tightly, like above my ankles, because it was May. It still wasn't that warm yet here. And that particular day was pretty magical. There was a beautiful breeze in the air. And I put my feet in the bottom of the water. It was only like maybe like 6, 7 inches. And all of a sudden a gust of wind poured through me and it was like spirit, like my hair flew back. It was like out of a movie. We actually have that on video. And right away I knew that it was a yes. It wasn't a, oh yes, you're going to move here. It was, there's no resistance. I was in total flow. And that is the way that I needed to hear it, because if it was a definitive yes, it might have scared me of like, ooh, question that. So it was like, yeah, you could do this. There's no resistance on this. And so I took that cue into the journey space. It was a profound journey space for me. And that journey was all about listening to my own internal guidance, my own intuition, my own divine knowing, and being able to discern between that and anything else that was happening in the room or the people in the room. And it was profound medicine for me. So I finished there. I definitely know that I can come here, but there was this other trip to Mexico and I had that planned and I had to go down there just to reconfirm in the deepest possible way that Austin is it. So the moment that I decided it was Austin and everything just opened up, like the Soul Essence retreat that I'm leading in the fall that I didn't even have a chance to talk to you about. I didn't even know the venue. I hadn't even booked the private property yet, but I mentioned to my community in some private WhatsApp group communication that I'm going to be leading the retreat these dates in the Austin area, who's in, and it completely sold out. I didn't even get a chance to market it anywhere. And then I find this little bungalow that he was like, yeah, you can rent it for like 3 months, give you a chance to get a lay of the land and figure out where you want to root. And I was like, that was so much grace. Then finally arriving here and making that trip halfway across the country, more so in fact, those 3 days, a deep initiation, thank God I had the gene keys, arriving here with such grace, such ease. And what I can say to you is that every part of being here, from how lush and beautiful and magical the energy feels and the nature is. There's something in the air here that feels deeply resonant and so aligned, it's activating me in ways that I can't possibly describe, that will reveal itself over time. But also another piece, and that is about the calling on our soul. And that is this, the stronger the call, the deeper the resistance, or the more that we might want to become aware of the timing, right? Like it wasn't time for me to come in those first 2.5, almost 3 years that I was observing. And it's because if I would have come sooner, I would have thought that I was needed to be a part of those particular communities that I was really attracted to early on, but ultimately revealed themselves to not be as resonant for me as I was deepening into my own personal spiritual evolution. I've become so devoted to my path of spiritual growth that they were no longer, in resonance. And I most likely would have left and moved home because I would have been like, what have I done? I've made a huge mistake. Meanwhile, in this past year, other teachers and other teachings have come through that are the very purpose, well, beyond like the truest purpose of my soul's evolution, which is communion, like to commune with all in peace. That's in the Gene Keys, and I cannot recommend enough that you get involved and study that for yourself so that you can know what your truest purpose is. It's 444, by the way, here, as I'm recording this in real time, 444 in the afternoon. Just saw that on the clock. I love that. Anyway, and so there's another sovereignty space that's coming through that I will share more as I go. I'm going to be fairly quiet about it. And I don't really know how deeply I will get into it super early on, but there's an activation in my soul that knows that that is the most important thing that I can do with my time on this planet in this incarnation. And so I'm excited about that. I've already enrolled into a couple of different programs and academies and have found my right teachers. And guess what? Everyone's based in either Austin or the Houston area. So my teachers and my guides are nearby. I'll be bringing some of them on the podcast soon because I cannot wait to share more of this with you in case it resonates with you. But so I look back on all of this and I can see, oh, the divine timing in it. Oh, and by the way, there's something else that was coming through back in like, I think November. I remember I was like, God, where am I moving? Where am I moving? Because I knew that my lease would be up for its second year, that I had been in that really beautiful apartment in Calabasas I knew I'd be there for 2 years, and that lease was going to come up for renewal on July 8th. So I knew that I would be moving somewhere. And so I remember like, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? And I was like, just constantly asking and talking about it. And my ego wanted to know, right? And finally, in about December, it was like, stop asking. When it's time, you will know. And it's because I had to go through some of the peeling back those layers of where I was really attuning to some of the fear frequency. And so that's what March's journey revealed to me. And then it was time. And so the reason I say all of that is because there's two parts to this. One, through deep listening, and that's a practice, turning inward, having nothing to do, just simply learning to be with ourselves, our highest selves, our soul. And you might attune to your angels and your guides, your celestial court, whatever that might mean for you. But ultimately, I mean, what I'm really hoping for and visualizing for you and me as well in a deeper way is to listen to the internal guidance calling us forth, to moving through those lower three chakras with full integral integration so that we're fully embodied and facing and feeling and freeing ourselves from those fear and shadow frequencies, but utilizing that energy as cosmic fuel into our gifts and our cities, SIDDHI, our reason for being here and ultimate attainment, which is part of why I studied the Gene Keys so deeply and thoroughly. And so there's that, but then there's also something to be said for if it's calling you, A, it's going to keep calling, but B, the calling could have some resistance that it is marinated in, right? And the deeper the resistance, the stronger and most likely more important reason that you are having the resistance is because it's the very reason why you are here on this planet at this time. And let's not forget that we are in a massive shift of human consciousness, right? The evolution of it all. And so there is deep purpose for each and every one of our reason for being here. And so if it's calling you, it will keep calling. And if there's resistance, just begin to embrace it and be with it and listen to it. Kind of like all of that resistance for those 3 years of like, I couldn't move to Austin because it wasn't time for me, but I kept listening. I kept focusing. I kept embracing. I kept going in. I wasn't discounting, dismaying. I was just kind of being curious and open and loose about it, but yet it was clear that there was a thread there. And so instead of it being according to my will and my timing, I kept availing myself to divine will. And I kept just saying, all right, use me as you choose, whatever's in the highest and best for me and whatever's in the highest and best for my journey and those that I am meant to serve ultimately. then I allow myself to go onto that path. I will walk that path, right? And so, what does that look like for you? If you're feeling the call, but there's some resistance and unworthiness, self doubt, whatever might be coming up, be with that and know that within those shadow frequencies, which is where the resistance resides, will reveal the gift, will reveal the answers. And by all means, ask for help. Remember, I was at my knees, on my knees at my altar back in January, asking for help. And then when help shows up in the form of a resource, a teacher, or a teaching, pay attention and note it, because it just may change your life. If you're still doing the same old, and listening to the same old podcasts with the same teachers on YouTube, it might be time to swap things up and to go into the areas that maybe feel dense or boring, because maybe, like me, a couple of years ago, I had no access to the gene keys. It was just like, oh, that's no way. Like, I'm not interested in that, right? But I kept showing up. And it reminds me of actually when I was first studying Kyle Cease's content. When I first started looking at his or trying to watch his content on YouTube, I was like, what? What is he even talking about? And now I find myself saying the very same things that he says, because we're all downloading from the same divine cloud, right? And I'll catch a video of his, and I was like, oh, I just shared that exact same phrase verbatim with a private coaching client or a mentee or in a group program or sometimes on this show. By the way, he's coming back on the podcast, and I'm so excited and grateful for that. And so maybe that will be your journey, but either way, get fully present to your life. And I don't mean what's happening on the external, my love. I mean what is happening within. My dear friend, Lena Franklin, my soul sister, walking this path bravely and courageously as well. Lena Franklin says the journey inward is the highest calling. So let's do this. Let's walk that path. Let's get really present to why we are here on this planet at this time and make it count every single day. Here's to our collective destiny and evolution. I love you. Have a beautiful rest of your day. And by all means, answer that call.